Okay, if I can please invite Secretary of State, Richards, Neville. Thank you very much, James. We caught back some time. I used to be in charge of product plans for Ford Motor Company. We used to do a 10-year plan, and electric vehicles and fuel cells were always put in years 9 or 10 because we had to show them somewhere, but they never ever came to fruition. I'm glad to say that it's finally, after all these years, coming to fruition. Questions? Can you please say who you are and who you are, what company, and there's a lovely lady here with a microphone. Another one here. Number one, please, sound person.
Stephen Voller from Cellar Energy. I have a question for the Secretary of State about venture capital. We're a SME. We're a spin-out from the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, so equivalent of Fraunhofer that you talked about. We have one of those energy storage breakthroughs that's talked about. We have funding from the TSB through a fantastic project with Unipart and Mara, but we're a venture-backed company. And the trouble is that when we look at those roadmaps, the timeframes are 10, 20 years out, which is way beyond the time horizon of most venture investors. So we've had to go outside of the UK to get the venture finance. What's being done to support that, to try and get the SMEs funded?
Well, there is a general problem of SME finance in the wake of the banking crisis, and we're sort of painfully aware of that. In terms of venture capital specifically, I think one thing that has happened, and I don't know whether you were aware of this, but the banks were persuaded to put $3 billion into a common fund, which we call the Business Growth Fund, which is run by sort of independents, and their job is to identify, medium-sized, rapid growth companies which would normally qualify for venture capital finance and support them in their growth. We are aware that there's a gap in the market here. In addition to the Business Growth Fund, there is a series of smaller government-backed venture capital funds, which I don't know whether you're aware of them. My private secretary's Amy is sitting on the end of the row there. We can link on the front row, and we can link you up with people in the department and let you know what's available.
Okay. Digby, I think was first, and then number one, then number two.
In the light of how this, certainly with government help, but in the light of how this is basically going to be driven, everything we've heard, by the private sector, in the light of the fact that all our overseas friends who are here today, and you're very welcome, are here to create wealth, make profit, and through that generate tax and employment. Would all of you, every one of you, please comment on, isn't it time that politicians and journalists stop smacking the hell out of business?
Who's going first?
I missed the last.
Slagging the hell out of business.
Stop slagging business.
Yes. Well,
politicians and journalists.
Well, I'd like to think we're doing what we can to encourage it. In the last 2 weeks, we've had large numbers of businesses here, making it very clear that Britain is very welcoming of investors. Actually, we attract more overseas investment than any country in the world, apart from the United States. I think they find this an attractive place to be. So I don't recognise the caricature. I think there is a sort of pro-business government. We have some very, very serious problems, mostly as a consequence of the fact that we had a massive financial heart attack in this country 4 years ago. The banking system went down, still a very serious problem, getting credit, and the consequences that have come from that in terms of the very large government deficit, which we're having to concentrate on, to the exclusion of other things that we'd like to do, consumers who borrowed too much in many cases, not all, reluctant to spend, hence we have a demand issue in domestic markets, and we have current problems in our main export markets in Europe. So we've got a whole series of challenges, and it is a difficult environment in which to operate, but I think most private investors acknowledge that we see the recovery as coming through private investment, international trade, and we're doing our best to get behind that.
If I could just come in on that.
Yeah, Richard.
I mean, I think Secretary of State's spoken about what you may call the political side. You also mentioned the journalists, and I'd like to address that if I may. You know, it seems an unfortunate fact of life that in most countries, but particularly here in the UK, bad news and, you know, doom-laden stories seem to sell papers and create circulation, or at least that's what the people running them believe. So I think we have tried to, one of our 3 key initiatives in the Automotive Council is actually one of communications, and it's actually run by the SMMT on behalf of the Automotive Council, and we are working very hard on getting the positive messages out there about the good work that's going on in automotive as a kind of a example or exemplar of manufacturing in the UK. We have made some progress. I wish we could make more progress. I wish we could make progress faster, but I think that I've begun to detect a slight shift away from, you know, all negative stories about the industry to more of a mixture, particularly about manufacturing, about automotive, and even some positive stories. The pickup we got on the switch to the positive balance of payments, I think, was particularly significant. A lot of papers picked that up with a kind of a surprise. Wow, I had no idea. I thought we didn't make cars anymore. So I think we'll carry on working very hard on that agenda, befriending the journalists who are willing to carry that message and giving them the stories they need to make their living.
Okay. James, Neville, any additional comment?
Nothing to add for me.
No?
Thanks.
Okay. Number 2, please.
Thank you. Mike Charlton, Tenneco. Maybe I've got 2-part question. First part was I didn't see emissions in terms of NOx and particulate matter in the technology strategy, just CO2. The other point that's been mentioned before, and I was chatting to guys over lunch about the issue of scale in the UK, and I was very excited to see the hydrogen plan. Again, scale could be an issue unless there's, maybe Vince, there's some political tie-up with our continental partners in terms of following the same kind of technology that allows those infrastructure investors to be able to see more than just the vehicle population in the UK.
Yeah, from a technology perspective, we do have, particularly in the heavy-duty area, some issues to resolve in terms of air quality. And the first part of our roadmaps and the first focus is on how do we clean up to a level where heavy-duty vehicles no longer have an impact on air quality. And that's an absolute focus from the industry at the moment. All we're trying to do is recognize while we're doing that, it's very tough to improve the fuel efficiency and the CO2 together. In passenger cars, it's slightly different in that we believe we have the technologies to take these to a level where they have virtually zero air quality impact, and it's a matter of how fast we can renew the fleet and bring these very clean vehicles to the market. So we will continue to see pressure on emissions to improve air quality, and it is actually part of that entire roadmap. All we focused on is on the low carbon part.
And then the hydrogen question, sorry.
The hydrogen thing is very interesting. And James and I have a lot of discussions about where hydrogen might go. The challenge I think we have with hydrogen is companies like Intelligent Energy have done a fantastic job of bringing down the cost of the product and the balance of plant, and it's looking very attractive. I would say the key challenge we've still got to overcome are mobile energy storage or mobile storage of hydrogen. How do you build an inexpensive hydrogen tank safely? And how do we build the infrastructure for what I would call green hydrogen, that is hydrogen from renewable sources? And our roadmap says those are the challenges we need to focus on in order to bring that product to market as soon as possible.
Is there a nuclear connection as well?
Potentially. Potentially. Again, you need to look holistically at the whole energy supply and a holistic energy strategy. I'm a member of the Energy Research Partnership Advisors DEC on what the energy policy should be, and it's incredibly complex to link all of these different things together and what's the best way to go. And we've just been looking at the future of hydrogen and where that might fit in and how we might make hydrogen more useful based on its storage and use capabilities. So we still see a very good prospect for hydrogen, but we're still not entirely clear how we get there yet.
I think I would add to that, I would go back to the chart that I put up, which begins to talk about the bigger role of hydrogen in what we call the intelligent grid. I'd also say that in the automotive perspective, although there are different programs rolling out in different countries, there is obviously a great push towards standardization and a sharing of information to try and accelerate and standardize where as possible to help the rollout.
Can we have number 2 here, please?
Thank you. Mike Richardson, Jaguar Land Rover. It's another hydrogen question, I'm afraid. But if we do get a rollout of a hydrogen infrastructure and a way of effectively storing it on the vehicle, both big questions, but are there any other prospects of using that hydrogen, for example, in a hydrogen internal combustion engine rather than a fuel cell? And my other question is, are there any other low-carbon fuels or renewable low-carbon fuels on the horizon that might make an impact in this area?
James, do you want to kick off?
Well, we specialise in fuel cells, so I'm actually going to pass that to Neville, who has a platform to talk about the broader remit of hydrogen-powered vehicles. I think I know what my view of the answer is. But
yes,
that was sneaky.
Thank you.
Over to you.
We've already talked about, you know, where we might see hydrogen fitting in and what we need to do to make that work, but that's not the only fuel that we need to look at. Renewable fuels in general, I think, are a very key part of the energy mix. The more we look at where we get our energy from a UK perspective, it is difficult to see a model where all we use is renewable electricity. It's very difficult to see a complete supply capable of providing the big ups and downs and the huge peaks and troughs in delivery that we need. So we're thinking you need to have some mix of energy. So we see, particularly in the short to medium term, an increased use of natural gas. We want to look at how we work with renewables to provide a bit more flexibility, so perhaps using hydrogen's energy storage, maybe there's other forms of energy storage we could use. And we're certainly going to see a growth of ethanol into gasoline in order to meet our renewable energy targets for 2020. We're not quite sure how we do that yet, but that's written into the regulations, so we've got to do it. So all I will say is renewable fuels, very, very important. Hydrogen are one of the key elements of that. There's still some issues to be resolved, but we have to work on all of these areas to be successful.
One last question. Number 2, please.
Okay. I'm Robert Kwashi from the Materials Knowledge Transfer Network. I noticed from the examples given about the roadmaps and the different work you're doing in different areas. One example was the lightweight materials area. And you mentioned UK strengths in aluminium and steel, which I agree with. There's no mention at all about advanced composites as a sort of a lightweight structural material solution. And I'd like to know what the Automotive Council's view is about advanced composites.
Richard?
Yeah, I may not have been clear enough in my description of the technology selection, but certainly by talking about motorsport and by talking about high-end sports vehicles and aerospace, I was absolutely talking about composites as well as aluminium, and we do believe that composites have a very important and growing role to play in helping us achieve lightweight structures in automobiles. That's the short answer to your question, and we've got lots of work going on amongst in the industry, reaching across also to aerospace to capitalize on those opportunities.
Okay. Is it very quick? Yes. Okay. Number 1.
Graham Mulholland from EPM Technology. I'd actually like to finish with a thank you. Manufacturing has felt a little bit unloved, and it's all service industry, which has collapsed. And we're now coming out of a tunnel, and I would urge, particularly Vince, it is not lazy Britain, it's Great Britain, and we're here to make parts that people want to buy.
Very good. If you'll join me in thanking the panel, and then please could you be back here by 10 to, so just about 12 minutes time, please. Thank you very much.